A late-night robbery in a restaurant quickly turns into a life-or-death situation when the manager takes matters into his own hands. Late one night, Inacio, a restaurant manager, counts their earnings for the day while Sara, the waitress, wipes glasses beside him. The pair stare at their lone customer, Amadeo, and wonder if he's a fast or slow eater since they're nearing closing. When the manager's arm accidentally brushes the woman's body, she tenses up. In the kitchen, Anna looks at the customer through the window and remarks how lonely it must feel to dine alone. Then, Jair, the cook, thinks the man's order, a rabbit dish, won't be enough to satisfy his appetite. After receiving the food, Amadeo annoyedly says he told the waitress not to put garlic in the dish. The man adds that even a tiny amount ruins the meal. Sara apologizes and says she told the cook about the client's request. Eventually, Amadeo massages his leg, which appears to be causing him pain, and eats the food despite the cook's mistake. By the rear exit, the waitress hangs out with Lucio, a waiter. The man asks if she wants to do something together after work, and when Sara says she needs a massage, he gives her a cheeky smile. The woman reciprocates his flirty behavior but warns that he shouldn't be on his phone at work. Seconds later, Anna appears carrying the garbage and asks if either has the back door key. The waitress says the manager has it and tells the woman she'll have to take the trash out through the front door once the last customer leaves. Suddenly, Inacio informs the pair that two more diners arrived. Lucio asks if the manager needs him to stay to help out, but the man says he can go home and Sara can handle it. The kitchen staff expresses their displeasure at having to cook since they've already cleaned the space. However, Inacio checks his watch and says they still have 15 minutes left on their shift. Then, the manager says they're expecting a food critic to dine at the restaurant on Wednesday. He says he expects a special menu prepared, much to Jair's annoyance. Jura asks which magazine the food critic writes for, but instead of acknowledging the question, the man steps out of the kitchen to answer a phone call. In the restroom, Inacio has a heated argument with his wife over the phone regarding their car. After the call, the irate manager knocks the soap dispenser off the wall. Then, he collects himself in front of the mirror before answering pretend questions the food critic might have for him on Wednesday. As he looks at his reflection, he states, as if convincing himself, that the restaurant staff is united. Inacio returns to the bar and tells Sara that the soap dispenser broke and needs replacing. He joins the waitress to speak to the new customers, Bruno and Veronica, a handsy couple taking their time reading the menu. The snobbish pair tell the manager Sara suggested a specific wine with a wild boar dish. Seeing the mocking nature of their comments, Inacio stands up for his employee by agreeing that the dish is an excellent choice, but offers a different kind of wine instead. Then, he instructs the waitress to retrieve a bottle and glasses for their guests. As Lucio leaves through the front door, he looks back at the woman and nods goodbye. When Sara asks for the couple's preferred doneness for the meat, Veronica dismissively says medium without glancing at the woman. Amadeo calls the waitress over and asks for whiskey, but she accidentally spills water on the man's arm as she clears the table. To appease the diner, Inacio offers him a free drink. Moments later, the manager speaks to Sara about Wednesday night. She says she already knows about the critic because the kitchen staff discussed it earlier. The man wonders what his employees said, but instead of answering his question, the waitress says the kitchen staff can be difficult to deal with sometimes. When Inacio asks for her input regarding any improvements she might suggest for the restaurant, Sara perks up, surprised the man wants her opinion. Later, Veronica tells her date that the meat's raw even though she asked for medium. However, she consumes the dish when Bruno offers her a bite. Then, Jura and Anna carry the smelly trash bags through the restaurant and tell Inacio they must leave. The manager says they can't leave because they're fired. So the pair takes one last look at Jair through the window, drops the garbage bags on the floor, and walks out. Moments later, the cook admonishes Inacio for firing his co-workers when all they wanted was to leave at the end of their shift to get to the subway before it closes. The manager says they can discuss the incident and other issues with the establishment later and asks Jair to wait in the kitchen. However, the defiant cook says he'll sit at the bar, then lets his hair down since he knows how much the man hates it. Suddenly, two robbers barge into the restaurant and order everyone to surrender their money and valuables. Magno grabs Veronica, and soon, he and his companion Nuno harass the defenseless woman. When Nuno moves on to Sara, his friend reprimands him for straying from their plan. Unbeknownst to the pair, Inacio quietly grabs his gun from behind the counter. Then, the manager shoots Nuno and orders Magno to drop his weapon. Eventually, the robber does as he's told. but Jair calls out Inacio for his risky move, especially since the man also had a gun. However, the manager says he knew the weapon was a toy. Amadeo says they must call the police, and the cook says they need an ambulance for the injured man. Instead of listening to the others, Inacio instructs the waitress to head to the back and find anything to tie up the robbers. The manager proclaims he'll take care of the criminals himself, much to Amadeo's confusion. Eventually, Sara returns with tape, and the armed man tells her to tie Magno's hands behind his back. To ensure no one else gets hurt, Jair follows Inacio's order to lock the robber in the kitchen. Then, the manager crouches by the injured Nuno and takes the box cutter from his pocket. Seconds later, the furious Veronica walks toward the man on the floor and kicks him several times until her husband stops her. Then, Inacio places the blade on the couple's table. When Jair returns, he and Amadeo agree they must call the authorities. However, Inacio says no and then reminds the cook about how useless the cops were the first time they got robbed. The traumatized woman is in disbelief that he won't call the police even after what they did to her. She says she can still smell the criminal stench on her body, and she wants them to rot in jail. The manager stands firm, so Veronica says he needs to pay her 100,000 real to keep her quiet. The cook offers to take the couple to a nearby hospital and speak to the authorities there, and then he points out that if Nuno dies in the restaurant, it'll be cursed forever. However, Inacio takes Jair's kindness to the criminal as proof that he planned the robbery to ruin the business. Confused, the cook argues that he works at the restaurant every day despite the many issues with the machines in the kitchen, and adds that he doesn't need to ruin the business because the manager already did so himself. He points out that he'll never be a brown nose like Sara, who doesn't take kindly to his words. Eventually, the armed man instructs the waitress to tie Jair up. Amadeo explains that what he's doing is kidnapping and will result in jail time. However, Inacio says it's his right to detain the criminals in his establishment. He picks up Magno's weapons and shows the cook it was a toy. He and Sara close the front door, and then he orders Bruno to tie up his wife. Amadeo tells the waitress to call the police, but the woman informs the manager that the customer's a cop because he wants her to contact the authorities. While the woman ties up his hands, Amadeo tells her not to do it so tightly because he has poor circulation. Later in the kitchen, Sara reinforces the hostage's tethers with rope. After the manager leaves, Amadeo asks Jair if they need to worry about him, but the cook says no because he's certain Inacio has an issue with him specifically. Then, Bruno asks if Amadeo's really a cop, and the man affirms but says he went down the wrong path. Nonetheless, the man tells Magno that a police officer saw everything he did to his wife. In the restroom, Sara stands guard as Veronica uses the facilities. However, the woman says she's embarrassed with the waitress in the room, so Sara steps out. When she's all alone, the woman shakes the skirt around her legs until the box cutter falls to the floor, revealing that she took it after Inacio placed it on their table. In the dining area, the waitress thanks the manager for saving her from the robber earlier. Suddenly, they hear sirens from outside and wonder if the cops heard the gunshot. To make sure no one sees through the windows, Inacio closes the blinds. Later, Sara unlocks the restroom, but to her surprise, Veronica slashes her chest with a blade when she opens the door. The woman runs to the dining area, where she cuts the man's face. Before she opens the front door, the manager threatens to shoot her. Veronica eggs him on, stating that he doesn't have it in him to pull the trigger. However, when the waitress tells the man to shoot, he fires the weapon, mortally wounding the customer. Upon hearing the gunshot, the cook asks the others if anyone knows they're in the restaurant. Unfortunately, none of them informed friends or family where they'd be tonight. In the restroom, Inacio touches the gash on his face and then licks the blood off his fingers. In the dining area, Sara takes the dead woman's earrings. Minutes later, she emerges from the restroom wearing Veronica's jewelry and shoes. The waitress walks toward the manager, and they kiss passionately. Later, Inacio drags the woman's lifeless body to the storage room. In the dining area, the pair watch Nuno take his last breath before moving his body to the back. In the kitchen, Jair tells the others that he resigned a month ago and the restaurant is nothing without his food. He says it's the reason why the manager has problems with him. Seconds later, the unhinged pair arrives to untie the cook. Jair theorizes the woman used her feminine wiles to trick Inacio into doing what he's told. Suddenly, they hear a knock on the front door, so the manager tells the woman to play loud music before answering. By the door, Lucio says he lost his phone and thinks he might have left it in the restaurant. The inebriated man suggests they head inside, but Sara shoots him down and says they don't share a mutual attraction. So the heartbroken man says he'll pick his phone up on Monday, then walks away. Later, Inacio orders Jair to record a confession stating that he is responsible for the deaths of 2 people. However, the cook says he knows the manager's issues with him have nothing to do with the restaurant or his recipes. He says the man hates that he has long hair, trimmed eyebrows, and the fact that he's attracted to men. So the deranged man asks Magno to come clean about his and Jair's plan to ruin his business. Surprisingly, the criminal says he and Sara planned the robbery, claiming to be the woman's lover. The waitress says he's lying and asks Inacio to believe she'd never betray him. To prove she is telling the truth, the manager slits Magno's throat while watching the woman's reaction. Then, he approaches Sara and wipes the blood on her arms. Moments later, the crying Jair thinks he's about to face the same fate. However, Inacio pulls his head back and chops off his long hair. The manager says he's never liked the cook's tresses and drops them on the floor. Immediately after, Sara runs to the hallway and throws up. When Jair returns to the kitchen, the men ask what happened to Magno, so he tells them that Inacio slit his throat. Later, while the manager teaches her how to hold a gun, the waitress points the weapon at the man and orders him to take off his clothes. Eventually, they make love on the blood-soaked floor. After a heated argument with his wife during a call, the man throws the phone at the mirror, breaking it. At the bar, Sara suggests they run away together, but he says he can't leave the restaurant. When she calls him a coward, the man tells her to never talk to him like that again. In the kitchen, Amadeo manages to wriggle out of his restraints. However, when he checks his phone, he realizes there's no service in the room. When he is unable to untie Jair, he promises he'll come back for them. He sees Sara alone by the bar, so he wraps his arm around her neck and asks where her accomplice is. Suddenly, Inacio comes from behind and knocks him out with a blow to the head. Later, Inacio orders the waitress to stay in the kitchen while he and Amadeo talk. The retired cop tells the manager that he'll regret taking a man's life, much like how he regrets killing the criminal who shot his leg. He says the nagging pain on the permanently damaged leg is his reminder every single day. In the kitchen, Jair tells Sara that the way Inacio ordered her to go to the kitchen isn't that different from a dog put out to the street by its owner. In the dining area, Amadeo bluffs that he called the police before his phone battery ran out, but his trembling hand gives him away. So the deranged man bludgeons the retired cop with a heavy statuette. Later, the manager tells the waitress that the only way for their night to end is for them to dispose of who's left and place the bodies in the freezer so they can serve the meat at the restaurant. When Inacio steps away momentarily, the conflicted waitress enters the kitchen to try and untie the captives. However, she hears the man returning and heads to the restroom. Eventually, the manager knocks on the door and takes her to the dining area to prove her loyalty by shooting Bruno. However, when she sees the crying man, she points the weapon at Inacio and begs him to let her go. Unfortunately, when she pulls the trigger, she realizes it's a toy. The woman drops the gun and picks up a knife. The deranged man orders her to drop it, and when she doesn't, he shoots Bruno, ending his life. Sara runs for the door, but Inacio tackles her and stabs her with a box cutter. Then, the manager sharpens a knife in the kitchen and approaches the cowering tied-up cook. Later, Jair nudges the waitress awake, implying that he managed to subdue Inacio and save himself. Before leaving the restaurant, the cook gathers his hair from the floor. In the kitchen, Sara finds the manager with his hands tied behind his back. The woman asks why he didn't kill her, and he says because he needs her. Eventually, the waitress stabs the man with a kitchen knife until he perishes. Then, she lays Inacio's body on a prep table and butchers it with an electric knife.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.